Wow, Canada. What, I'm not even going to say what a race, what a weekend. Because from practice through to qualifying, through to the race, non-stop, unpredictability, excitement, just overall a great weekend of motorsport. And truthfully, the best race I've seen since this year, I think it's safe to say. And it really reinforces, Formula One is back. I mean, after Monaco, which, I know a lot of people were a bit unhappy about in terms of on track and so on activity. You can't argue with this weekend. This weekend had everything. It had everything. Fantastic. In fact, it is another Roman Coke race for sure. In fact, so many different things happened that I don't think it's possible to cover everything in this video, and I won't even try. So I'm gonna really just touch on a number of things. It probably won't even be in order. I'll probably talk about Red Bull towards the end, because a lot of things happen, good and bad, for a lot of teams, a lot of people, and all kinds of stuff. Plus, of course, a number of developments have occurred between Monaco and now. So, since the last video, I did a number of other developments. So let's touch on a couple things. For example, Ocon getting fired, because make no mistake, he was fired. Tsunoda getting re-signed, always a plus. And Perez getting re-signed. Don't get that one. But we can expand on that if time permits. So those are a few things that led up to this weekend. Now, practice sent a very clear message, and that was Mercedes. I don't want to say is back, because that might be a little premature, but that Mercedes were going to be a force to be reckoned with at this race. They were clearly the team to beat. Hamilton clearly got the setup right, got a feel for the track. I mean, this is a track he likes. I mean, if you're a student of F1, you'll know that this is a track he likes. He's won here 6 times. And, he clearly likes this track. I think he is on the pole maybe 5 times or something like that, or 7 times. I don't remember. But he's won here a lot. And so it's a track he likes. And it showed. He was on the pace from early. Now, to be fair, in my Monaco review, I did say that I thought Mercedes looked strong. And that new front wing that they put on Russell's car seemed to work. Now, the thing is that Monaco is such an anomaly that it would be a bit of a risk to put too much emphasis on a result there. But they did look good there, and it certainly paid off here. It's clear that the new front wing has dramatically altered the aero balance of the car. The car is now consistent. They can make subtle changes to the suspension according to track conditions, according to the driver's likes and dislikes and so on, and the car responds. They don't seem as tied into a narrow little, like a little box that they were in, where it has this extremely narrow performance window, and if you're outside of it on either side by even a millimeter, the car is nowhere. It clearly has a much broader envelope of performance this time around. And they've said that they're bringing up new floor to complement the front wing, I think for the next meet, for Spain, for Barcelona. So, which is a much higher speed track. And so I am extremely encouraged by that. I may not be a fan of Mercedes or its drivers per se, but I want good racing. I've always said that. I'm on record as saying that. And for sure, if they can replicate what they did this weekend, It's just one more hat thrown into the ring of the Constructors' Championship. McLaren and Ferrari had made their bigger step earlier in the year, and now Mercedes seems to be, joining the party. More power to them. Ferrari. Wow, I mean, talk about a reversal of fortune. From being the heroes of Monaco, they are literally the zeros of Canada. I mean, both cars out in Q2 never looked like they were getting a handle on the setup for the weekend. And then in a race, dismal, Leclerc with an engine problem. Okay, that can happen to anybody. That's not specific to Ferrari, of course. And that just could be a bad coincidence. But boy, it really picked a bad time to happen considering all the other crap that was happening with them. Leclerc, after to what extent he can play stock in what he said, and that he wasn't just towing the political line for the team. He did say that the car actually felt good in the corners, and so it was, obviously with the engine problem, it was on the straights that he was losing all his time. But he did say that the car didn't feel bad in the corners, so maybe it wasn't a total disaster in terms of the car setup, but the result, nowhere. Sainz was floundering around the back. Then did what I consider to be, I don't want to say unforgivable, but a very poor judgment. After the car spun and it spinning off the track, and then obviously when it rotated back the other way and started to roll backward onto the racing surface, I'll be honest, I was hoping he would have pressed the brake. I've seen that happen a lot of times with other drivers, and they brake because obviously the car is rolling backward out into a live track. That's a risky thing. I mean, and he took out Albon, who was having a really good race. Who I'll touch on Albon in a second. In terms of the race, I'm a little disappointed in how that transpired. Because we're not talking about amateur racers. These are not just some weekend warriors who, in their cars. These are professional drivers driving for many years, starting from karting from they were little children. These guys have all been racing for, 15 years or more. These are seasoned racers. You don't roll backward. It's not that the car is out of control at that point, like it has crashed and he's just a passenger at that point. The car is rolling backward. You've caught the spin in the grass, and the car is now rolling backward onto the track. Surely you can just press the brake, man. I'm disappointed in how that went down. And Albon, nothing he could do there. Collected him and he's out of the race. He made one of the best passes I've seen for a while. Probably the best pass for this year, and I think the last one I saw like that in terms of quality of pass was the pass that Leclerc did on, I think it was Perez at in Vegas last year. But this pass that Albon did was wild when he passed the two cars. I think it was a Haas and a Williams. It could have been. No, not a Williams. It was a Haas and a Aston Martin. Wicked pass. Brilliant. I mean, or it could have been an Alpine. I could be wrong. It doesn't even matter. Great pass. Great foresight. Brave. Awesome. Really disappointed that it ended that way for him. But, it is what it is. You'll have to move on and live another day. Let's touch on, those are some of the bad guys. I think Ferrari's day was terrible. I think for a lot of people, I think the Alpine did okay. Both finishing the points, which is great. Ocon showing somewhat his nasty side again. I mean, I was very disappointed in some of the things he said after the race. In keeping with this character, in my opinion, because he made it seem as if the decision was a wrong one to let Gasly pass, even though it wasn't. It was a good decision. But it didn't work, not because Gasly couldn't, but because he took so long to let it happen that by the time Gasly got past him, he only had one lap in which to try to pass Ricardo. And so, you know, it's that's such a, I tell you, that guy Ocon, I hope we see the last of him. I really mean it. If a big team, like worse, like an Audi or something, hires him, I would be disappointed. I think that guy is toxic and he's just bad wherever he goes. Notwithstanding his driving ability, he's not somebody you want in a team. He needs to go and do something like rallying or something where he's you know in a car by himself or with a navigator, but not with other cars around, you know, and him just drive by himself. That's what he needs to do. So I you know, Alpine did okay, but no, I am not holding much hope for them, as I said. Haas also didn't do badly. I mean, that gamble that they did at the start with the full wets, brilliant. In fact, I would argue that when Magnussen came in for his first stop, if they had not screwed up the pit stop, that strategy roll of the dice that they did there would have paid off very well. I think Magnussen would have come out in a very strong position. Certainly would have been in the top 10 when he came back out. Probably as high as 5th, maybe 6th, 7th at worst. So that would have been a great strategy had the pit stop not been so slow. But, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. So it is what it is. Most of the other guys did steady drives. Aston Martin both finished in the points. It's pretty good. You know, they seem to be... they seem a little lost. They really don't. They're not making any progress. They'll have their odd races where they seem to show signs of hope. But they're kind of like a one step forward, two step backward kind of team. I don't know really what's going on there. I hope it's not a case of the owner, Lawrence Stroll, exerting too much influence in terms of the engineering side. Obviously, he's exerting influence in terms of the driver, which is having his son there, who is just dead weight. But it worries me that he's not messing around with stuff in the engineering side as well, because they just don't seem to be, I don't know, they don't seem to be anywhere. But I guess we'll see. I mean, every team goes through their ups and downs, but we'll see. Williams, as I said, Sargent needs to leave. Frankly, he just needs to leave. I was very skeptical when I had first heard the suggestion that Sainz should go there. Again, because I think Sainz is a good driver and deserves a good team. 2, I'm not entirely convinced about what Vols, the team principal, is going to do. But in retrospect, in terms of what's available now, I can kind of see why he might want to go to Williams instead of Audi. There are other circumstances. Again, we can't spend too much time on that because that's really too much of a digression for this video about Canada. But I can understand why he might want to go to Williams, and if he does, then he can't replace Sargent early enough. I wouldn't mind if him did leave Ferrari and go there now, because Sargent needs to go. Man, that guy needs to go. I made some notes, but the truth is, as I said, this is gonna be just random. But because I really didn't want this video to be structured. I kind of want the video to be like what Canada was, just upside down. So I want to say one more thing on Ferrari before I start touching now on the top guys. I'm wondering, I said something recently, I think it was in Monaco or even the one before, I think it was in Mola, where I said Ferrari seems to have made the biggest gain when it comes to tire management. Their biggest weakness in years past was their inability to control tire temperatures. They would always be fast. They always had the capability of doing fast laps. Leclerc is a brilliant qualifier, and could extract a lot from the car, and the car had pace to give him one lap, performance. But it would always go south once the race progressed. It would just chew through the tires, especially the rears. The biggest improvement they made this year was getting the chassis to be sympathetic to its tires. And with the current, I would say, bad type of Pirellis that we have now, where they just fall off a cliff, a car that can extend stints and gradually bring the tire to a wear point is obviously an advantage. However, you can err too much in one direction, because I think if you look at the challenge that they had in the wet, it could be that the car is simply not, it's so good at controlling its tire temperature that it's not allowing the tire to come up to temperature when the track surface is too cold or it's wet. So maybe they're a victim of their own success in terms of getting the control of the tire wear, but it now not being able to activate or fire up the tires and get them into the correct temperature range so they can start gripping. That could be a factor. I don't know for sure, I'm just speculating, but I think that's a possibility because they really were nowhere in the rain. It's not like Leclerc and Sainz can't drive in the rain, they can, but they were just nowhere. So maybe it's a tire, maybe the chassis just isn't working with the tires when it comes to lower temps. All right, let's look at the top guys. Let's start with Mercedes. 3, 2, 1. Russell. And I guess we can extend it to Hamilton. And we can touch with Piastri as well, with Norris. Now, Mercedes really, as I said before, Mercedes did very well. They were fast. I don't think they would have won the race necessarily had everything gone right for them. But I think Russell, if he hadn't made some of the mistakes that he made, I think Russell could have possibly come second. I think he had the pace towards the end on the mediums that he could have attacked Norris and pushed him for second. I think he could have if he didn't make some of the mistakes that he did and fell back a couple seconds each time that he made those mistakes, whether running wide, taking the straight in the chicane, whatever the stuff that he did. So I do think that he could have done better. I think the situation with Hamilton has been badly overblown. I think the hards actually weren't as bad a choice as the people are making it sound. Firstly, he didn't have any mediums, so his choice would have been softs or hards. Well, guess what? Russell was running the hards earlier, and obviously the data suggested that the hards weren't bad. And lo and behold, who set the fastest lap? Hamilton on the hard. So clearly the hard couldn't have been that bad a tire, right? So I think that they rolled the dice, not having mediums. They had the choice of soft or hard, and they rolled the dice with the hard. I don't think that was a bad choice. I think Russell would have caught him anyway. Even if he had been on the softs, I think Russell would eventually have gotten him. I could be wrong, but I think Russell really was charging at the end. He was on it, and I think he probably would have gotten him. So I think Mercedes really can take a lot away from this weekend. They did spectacularly well, and this is now, if this form continues, this is now a 4-horse race, no longer a 3-horse race, right? McLaren and Ferrari stepped up. Mercedes has joined the party, no question about it. We'll see what happens on the faster flowing European tracks, because there's a triple header coming up now with Spain going into Europe. That's where we'll see the proof of the pudding. Silverstone is super fast. We'll see what happens there as well. McLaren getting up to second and fourth. Fifth. I thought that Lando drove superbly. I am going to argue a point that Lando could have won the race. Now, that requires another sip around. Hear me out. that pit call, or not lack of a pit call when the safety car came out, I believe influenced the outcome of the race more than we might think. The way the commentators said it, I watched both the Sky feed and the F1 TV feed, and the impression given was that the safety car announcement came after he had passed the pit entry. When you watch the date, when you go back and look, that's not true. He actually had the chance to pit. The safety car call came before he got to the pit entry. So that was actually a judgment call by the team. And to an extent by him. And I'll touch on that in a bit, time allowing. Now, remember something. This is critical. And this is a bit of a digression. This thing about strategy is that you need to remember is in F1, strategy is huge. Don't be fooled by the persons you see sitting at the track side. That is the chief strategist, and yes, they're going to ultimately make the final call. But they have a whole host of other strategists sitting behind them in the motorhome, and an even bigger set of strategists back at the home base of the team. All are on real time. All are seeing the data real time. All are communicating with each other real time. All are seeing what each other is seeing. All of those screens that you see them looking at. So they all know. These guys run hundreds of simulations, probably even thousands sometimes. During the race, they actually have enough computing power in real time that they may run more than 100 simulations in one race. Okay? So they have instantaneous data to make decisions. In other words, strategy calls are not based on what you know. They know everything. Strategy calls are just based on your judgment on what you know, not the amount of what you know, because you know everything, right? And so I think that they should have pitted him instantly, but they didn't. They rolled that dice because if you understand the term crossover, that period between when it's faster to go on a slick versus coming off of an intermediate, and that's a crucial period. It falls into a percentage of lap time. Once you're under 120% of your lap time on a dry tire, then when you're on the wet, you should switch back to the dry. If you're over 120%, it's like 119, 120, but once you're over 120, then you go to the wet. That critical crossover percentage, right, was clearly already there, and they should have switched, and they didn't. They did 2 extra laps. He got caught behind the safety car, and that all of that 11-second or 12-second or whatever he had went up in smoke. Now, having said that, once after the second safety car, when they basically were restarting right behind one another, he didn't have the pace to match Verstappen. But that was when it was dry. That was when it was basically almost fully dry. When it was still that damp section, I think the McLaren the chassis was clearly vastly superior to the Red Bull when it was damp. Because obviously the Red Bull is still suffering from that excessive stiffness. It can't take curbs. The McLaren had a lot of compliance, and in wet conditions or even damp, compliance is gold. That's what you need to get the mechanical grip, especially in the slow speed corners. And the McLaren clearly had that. So there's no question that the McLaren and the Mercedes were much faster. They had the measure of the Red Bull. The Red Bull as a car, the RB20, could not match the McLaren, and the Mercedes at this track. It was literally just Verstappen that pulled that win out of the bag for Red Bull. I can tell you that right now. Okay, the Mercedes and the McLaren had them. And again, if they got their strategy calls right and a little less mistakes from the drivers, I think we'd have seen a different result, because Red Bull really had no answer on track other than relying on Max's skill. And Max's skill can't overcome that. It's not like Norris and Russell can't drive. They're almost on the same level as him. And so if those strategical errors on McLaren's part or driver error on Russell's part didn't take place, we could have seen a different result. Piastri drove well, but again, I think he succumbed a little to tire management issues, which is something that plagued him quite a bit through last year. And we saw improvements this year, but I think he pushed a little too hard, used up a little too much of his tires. If you look, for example, contrast that with how Norris sat back when Russell and Verstappen are running at the head of the pack in the earlier stages of the race, and they were doing like 31s and 32s and pulling. Norris sat back at 34s and 35s. He clearly understood the tire strategy and used it to his advantage, because once he attacked and passed, he just pulled away. As I said, he put on 11 seconds on the two of them like that. So there's no question that had Piastri also applied a little more tire management, he could have been up there. Certainly, Russell and Hamilton wouldn't have just blown past him. That's for sure. Okay, I'm not saying he would have necessarily passed Norris or so, but he would have certainly not been passed by Russell and Hamilton, because I don't think the Mercedes was faster than the McLaren in pure pace on the track, and certainly not on the damp. Red Bull now. So Red Bull is facing a serious conundrum. They've rehired Perez, which is something I've complained about Perez as a driver, and it is now 2 weekends in a row that have been absolute abject failures. Man is out in Q1. Let that sink in. The car that won the race, driven by someone else, is out in Q1 in qualifying. I mean, that is just an untenable situation. And in my opinion, it is a damning indictment of Christian Horner in that decision that he took. I mean, there may be many motivations. I actually had to take a sip of rum just to digest that one. So unpalatable is that decision that I had to wash it down. Yes, he brings a lot of money. There's no question. He has, Calatel and Telmex and Banco Norte or whatever. He brings significant amounts of personal sponsorship to the table. But is that commensurate with manufacturers' points and TV rights payouts? I don't think so. I doubt it strongly. Is that commensurate with sponsor targets, like in terms of finishing higher in the manufacturers' championship and bonus payments from sponsors? Don't think so either. So really and truly, money plays a role, but then it can't be the only one. And hence, because I don't think Red Bull is exactly short of money either. And so I have to conclude that there's other factors, the two main ones being equally distasteful in my view. One is that Horner is just paying him back a little loyalty because he had supported him during his whole, sexting scandal and all of that. That's one theory. Other theory is that Verstappen's team do not want a strong teammate, and Perez clearly would fit into that category. And because Horner is fearful that Verstappen will leave and go to, say, a Mercedes or so, he's trying to appease him by keeping Perez. I don't know if any of that is true, all of that is rumor, but I have to say that that decision to me is just, whatever the reasons behind it, it's a bad decision. I remain convinced of that. I mean, Perez may just surprise me and turn around and win every race from here onward, but I wouldn't hold my breath. It probably would be fatal. So let's save the winner for last, Mr. Verstappen. We're not gonna do that, brother. That guy is I've said this before, and I will say it again, much to criticism from a lot of the LH guys and so on. But sorry to say, that dude is like a robot. He's like an android. I wouldn't say he doesn't make mistakes, but he makes so few, and they often are of so little consequence that it becomes irrelevant. He essentially won this race because he made less mistakes than the others. And that is crucial. It is the difference between winning and losing, because I maintain, very comfortable in my view, that McLaren and Mercedes were both faster than Red Bull, and Norris and Russell in particular could, at different stages of the race, had they not made the errors that they or their team made, could have easily taken the lead and held it. Their pace was sufficient for that. And so his consistency, his calmness under pressure, despite, he might get heated on the radio, but that don't translate into what he's doing through the steering wheel and the pedals. At the end of the day, this dude is driving the wheels off that car. And make no mistake, the Red Bull is a great car. It's still probably the pick of the bunch, but it is no longer the best car by any margin. As in, on any given track, that balance shifts. There are tracks when it is not the best car. There are other tracks when it probably will be. I'm fairly confident that when it gets back to the smooth European circuits, it will improve. I said this in Monaco, that I expect them to win in Canada, but by a lesser margin. That certainly proved the case here. And I expect that trend to continue to Europe, where I think it will improve even more. But there is no question of a doubt, it was not the best car at Monaco, and it was not the best car here. Verstappen is literally driving. Verstappen is extracting from that car more than that car really has. Great achievement. Credit to him. And again, the team making the right strategy calls at the right time, picking the correct tires, when to put them on, when to pull him in, when to put him back out. If you watch where they pit, watch how he rejoins, the timing is just bam, bam, bam. Okay? I mean, all of those decisions were crucial and timely, and perhaps most importantly, correct. Great race, as I said, thoroughly enjoyable. Even the qualifying had me on the edge of my seat. This was really a good race. Really a good race weekend. Reinforces my love for Formula One. It didn't need to be reinforced. I love it anyway. But this really highlights why Formula One is just the ultimate. I love it. Looking forward to Barcelona. Great race.